Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm going to be honest with you right out of the gate.
Please do.
When you hear the phrase public administration, your brain probably tries to protect you by shutting down. You picture beige walls, endless forms, the smell of stale coffee in a DMV waiting line, and dusty textbooks written by guys named Luther. It sounds like the absolute definition of boredom.
It definitely has a branding problem. I mean, administration is one of those words that feels designed to put people to sleep. It implies paperwork, red tape, and, just slowness.
But, and this is a big but, we are going to argue today that this boring, beige bureaucracy is actually the only thing standing between us and total chaos.
Right.
We are looking at a stack of sources today, university lectures, historical analyses, and some pretty dense theory that paint a very, very different picture. They argue that public administration is essentially the operating system of civilization.
That's not an exaggeration at all. You can have the most charismatic leaders, you can have the most poetic constitution, and the best laws on paper. But if you don't have the machinery to actually execute those laws,
Then what do you have?
you don't have a society. You have a mob with good intentions.
So that is our mission today. We are going to decode this machinery. And we are doing this with a very specific listener in mind, the learner. We know a lot of you tune in because you're prepping for university exams, or maybe you're writing a paper on administrative theory, or you're trying to crack a civil service entrance test.
And this deep dive is structured specifically for you. We aren't just skimming the surface. We are going to break down the definitions, the history, the competing theories, and yes, the acronyms you absolutely have to memorize if you want to pass.
Consider this the ultimate study companion. We're going to turn the lecture notes into a conversation you can actually follow. And this is stick around until the end.
This is important.
We are doing something we've never done before. We are running a rapid-fire exam prep session. We've pulled actual multiple-choice questions, MCQs, straight from the source material. We're going to test you to see if you've actually retained what we're about to talk about.
It's going to be a lecture, a debate, and a tutoring session all rolled into one.
Okay, let's start at the very bottom, the foundation, the words themselves. Public administration. It sounds rigid. It sounds, I don't know, controlling. Where does this term actually come from?
Well, it's funny you say that because if we look at the etymology, it's Latin. It's a combination of ad and ministrare.
Administrare, okay.
Now, most people assume administer means to rule or to manage, but ministrare actually translates to serve or to care for.
Wait, really? To serve?
Yes.
To care for people?
That feels incredibly contradictory to the modern experience. When I'm standing in line for a license renewal, I don't feel like I'm being served or cared for.
No.
I feel like I'm being processed. That's the modern disconnect. But the root meaning is vital. Ideally, an administrator is a servant. The public part simply defines who is being served, the people. So, at its core, public administration is the government serving the people.
One of our sources, a lecture by Manish Verma, brings up a really interesting origin story for this. He argues that administration isn't a modern invention. It didn't start with filing cabinets. It started with survival.
Right. To understand why we have administration, you have to look at what life was like before we had it. Go back to the nomadic phase of human history.
Hunter-gatherers.
Exactly. Hunter-gatherers.
The ultimate freedom. No taxes, no borders.
Sure, but also no security. You moved from place to place looking for food. Your primary goal was just surviving the night, finding a meal, and not becoming a meal for a wild animal.
Right. Constant state of anxiety.
In that nomadic state, there was no administration because there was no settled community to manage. There was no property to speak of.
But then everything changes. The agricultural revolution happens. Humans decide to stop running and start farming.
And that changes everything. Once you settle near a river and start growing crops, you suddenly have assets. You have a stockpile of grain. You have a permanent home.
You have things worth stealing.
You have things worth stealing, and you have a community that needs to stick together to protect them.
So problems arise that one person can't solve alone. That's the key.
Exactly. You need a wall to keep out predators. You need an irrigation ditch. You need to decide who gets water when the river is low. One person can't build a wall alone.
No.
You need a cooperative effort. You need a group of elders to say, okay, you 5 stand guard tonight and you 10 dig the ditch tomorrow.
So the first public administrator wasn't a bureaucrat in a suit. It was the guy in the tribe organizing the defense of the grain silo.
Precisely. That group, that organized effort to protect and manage the community was the seed of the state. Over thousands of years, that group of elders evolved into the massive government machinery we have today.
So if we need a definition for our notebooks for the exam, public administration is defined as the cooperative effort to enforce public policy.
That's the clean academic definition. Public means people. Administration means government. It is the government in action.
It's the doing part.
It's the doing part. The legislature writes the recipe, which is the policy, and the administration cooks the meal. They do the enforcement.
But here's where it gets messy. You'd think defining what is administration would be simple. But looking at these papers, it's clear that scholars have been fighting a civil war over this definition for 100 years.
Oh, yeah.
It seems there are two rival camps, the integral view and the managerial view.
This is a classic academic debate, and if you are taking an exam, pay attention because they will ask you to distinguish between these two. They are two completely different ways of looking at the same organization.
Okay, let's start with the integral view. This sounds, well, integrated, inclusive.
It is. The champion of this view was L.D. White, who wrote the first textbook on the subject way back in 1926.
Okay.
And White looked at a government department and said, what counts as administration? His answer was, everything.
Everything, even the stuff that isn't management.
All of it. Under the integral view, administration includes the minister at the top making the big decisions, the mid-level manager creating the schedule, the clerk filing the papers, and the janitor sweeping the floor.
Wait, play devil's advocate here. How is the janitor doing administration? They're cleaning.
The argument is that the janitor is facilitating the purpose of the organization. I mean, think about it. If the office is filthy and hazardous, the clerks can't work.
True.
If the clerks can't work, the manager can't manage. Therefore, the janitor is an integral part of the administrative machine. Their work contributes to the fulfillment of public policy.
Okay, I see the logic. It's the sum total of all activities, manual, clerical, managerial, you name it, to achieve the goal.
Right. It's a very broad definition. It covers the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. It's the wide-angle lens.
Now, compare that to the managerial view.
The managerial view is much narrower and honestly a bit more elitist. The big name here is Luther Gulick. He argued that administration is only the work of the bosses.
So, in Gulick's world, the janitor and the clerk don't count.
No. They are doing technical or manual work. Gulick argued that administration is a specific skill set. Planning, organizing, controlling, budgeting. It's the work done at the top of the organization.
So if you aren't doing those specific management tasks, you aren't an administrator, you're just a worker.
In his view, yes.
I came up with an analogy for this. Tell me if this works.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine a movie set.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the integral view, making the movie involves the director, the star actors, the camera operators, the lighting crew, and the guys at the catering table making sandwiches. They are all filmmakers because they're all contributing to the final product.
That tracks perfectly with L.D. White's view. Everyone is integral.
But if you take the managerial view, the guy making sandwiches is just a sandwich maker. The lighting guy is just an electrician. The only people doing administration, or in this case filmmaking, are the director and the producer because they're coordinating the whole thing.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. And neither is necessarily wrong, but the managerial view, Gulick's view, became very dominant in the mid-20th century because people wanted to turn management into a science.
A formula.
They wanted a formula for being a boss.
And that desire for a formula gave us possibly the most famous and ugliest acronym in the entire field.
I know exactly what you're about to say.
POSDCORB.
POSDCORB. It sounds like a Soviet satellite or a medical condition.
POSDCORB. If you are listening to this for exam prep, write this down. Tattoo it on your arm if you have to.
Yeah.
You cannot pass a Public Admin 101 class without knowing POSDCORB.
It was coined by Luther Gulick in 1937. He was trying to break down exactly what a chief executive does. He distilled the job of a manager into 7 specific functions.
Let's break them down letter by letter, but let's use a real example to make it stick. Let's say we are the government and we need to build a new bridge. How does POSDCORB apply? Start with P.
P is for planning. Before you dig a single hole, you need a scheme. You need to outline what needs to be done and the methods to do it. Where does the bridge go? How big is it? What's the timeline? What materials do we need? That's planning.
Okay, next.
O is for organizing. This is all about structure. You can't just have a mob of workers show up. You need a hierarchy. Who is the chief engineer? Who are the site supervisors? Who reports to whom? You are establishing the formal structure of authority.
Got it.
Then S. S is for staffing. This is the HR function. You have the plan and the structure. Now you need bodies to fill the roles, hiring engineers, training laborers, and, maintaining favorable work conditions.
Next up is D.
D is for directing. This is the ongoing leadership. The plan is static, but reality is dynamic. The chief executive has to make decisions daily, give orders, and lead the team when problems inevitably arise.
Then we have CO. They go together.
Right. CO is for coordinating. This is crucial, especially in a big project like a bridge. You have an electrical team, a concrete team, a steel team, and a traffic management team.
They all need to be on the same page.
Exactly. Coordinating is making sure they talk to each other so the concrete team doesn't pour the foundation before the electrical team lays the wires. It's interrelating the various parts of the work.
Makes sense. R?
R is for reporting. The boss needs to know what's happening. This involves research, inspection, and records, keeping the superiors and the public informed that the bridge is on schedule or, more likely, over budget.
And finally, the big one, B.
D is for budgeting, the fuel for the whole project. Fiscal planning, accounting, and control. You can't build a bridge without managing the money flow.
So Gulick's argument was, if you are doing these 7 things, POSDCORB, you are doing public administration.
Correct.
And he thought this was universal. It didn't matter if you were building a bridge, running a hospital, or commanding the Navy. The technique of management was the same.
Exactly. He viewed management as a completely transferable skill. If you are good at POSDCORB, you can manage anything.
But there's a trap here. There is a massive flaw in thinking that technique is everything. And a critic named Louis Merriam pointed this out brilliantly.
Louis Merriam was the buzzkill for the POSDCORB party. He basically said, okay, great, you know how to plan and budget, but do you know anything about bridges?
Right. If I'm a master at staffing and reporting, but I don't know the first thing about surgery, you definitely don't want me running a hospital.
Exactly. Merriam argued that POSDCORB is empty without subject matter. You need technical knowledge of the specific field you are managing. You need to know about public health to run a health department or criminology to run a police department.
You use a great analogy for this, the scissors.
Yes. This is another one to remember for the exam. He said public administration is an instrument with 2 blades, like a pair of scissors.
Okay.
One blade is the knowledge of the subject matter, engineering, medicine, education, law. The other blade is the technique of management, POSDCOR.
And you can't cut with one blade.
You need both. If you have a brilliant surgeon who can't budget, who has no POSDCOR skills, the hospital goes bankrupt.
Right.
And if you have a brilliant MBA who doesn't know what a scalpel is, all POSDCORB but no subject matter, the patients die. To be an effective administrator, you need to sharpen both blades.
That brings up a fascinating question about the nature of this field. Is public administration an art or a science? Because political science implies, well, science. It implies charts, data, predictability. But managing humans feels like an art form.
It does, and the sources are pretty clear on this, even if it feels like a bit of a cop-out answer. It is both.
How can it be both? Those feel like opposites.
Not necessarily. Think of it this way. It is a science because there is a systematic body of knowledge. We have principles, we have data, we can study history, and to some extent predict outcomes. For example, we know scientifically that if an organization has too many layers of hierarchy, communication slows down. We can chart that, we can measure that. That is the science.
Okay, so the textbook stuff, the principles we can study, that's the science.
Right. But the application of that knowledge, when you have to deal with real people in real situations, that is an art.
Give me an example.
Crisis management. Imagine a riot breaks out or a sudden flood hits a city. You can read every manual on earth, you can have all the scientific data, but in that moment, the administrator on the ground needs creativity. They need intuition. They need leadership presence to calm the crowd or inspire the rescue team.
You can't learn that from a chart.
You can't. That isn't a formula. That's an art. It requires practice and skill.
It's like painting. The science is knowing how to mix the chemical pigments to create the color red.
Yes.
The art is knowing where to put that red on the canvas to make a masterpiece.
That is a perfect analogy. The science provides the tools. The art is how you use them to solve human problems.
So we've covered the what and the nature. Now we have to address the elephant in the room. The debate that happens at every dinner party when someone complains about the government. Public versus private.
The eternal question.
I hear this constantly. Why is the government so inefficient? Why can't the post office run like Amazon? If a business ran the DMV, I'd be in and out in 5 minutes. So challenge me here. Is running a government actually different from running a business? Or is that just an excuse for being slow?
It's a fair question, and there is a convergence happening, which we'll get to, but fundamentally, they are different species. And the source material quotes Paul Appleby on this. He gave the definitive answer. Government is different because it is political.
Government is different because it is political. Okay, unpack that for me. What does that really mean?
In a private business, the direction comes from market forces. The goal is simple and clear: profit. If the iPhone makes money, Apple is happy. Efficiency is defined by the bottom line.
Right.
But in public administration, the direction comes from political decisions, which come from the people, and the people rarely agree on what they want. You're balancing competing values, not just calculating profit and loss.
And you're operating in a fishbowl.
Exactly. Amazon answers to shareholders. If they make a profit, the shareholders are happy. Public administration answers to the voters, the legislature, the media, and the Constitution. You are operating in a glass house.
That leads to the accountability difference, which seems huge.
It's a massive difference. If a CEO takes a client to a $500 lunch to close a deal, that's business development. It's celebrated.
Good for them.
If a public administrator takes a contractor to a $500 lunch,
It's a scandal. It's corruption, misuse of taxpayer funds. It's on the front page of the newspaper.
because it's not their money, it's public trust. That is why we have the red tape. The red tape isn't there just to annoy you. It's there to ensure fairness and prevent theft. It slows things down, yes, but it ensures accountability.
Then there's the service motive versus the profit motive.
This is maybe the most critical difference. A business exists to make a profit. If a product isn't profitable, they stop making it. If a customer isn't profitable, they drop them. If a location isn't profitable, they close the store.
Apple wouldn't open a store in a tiny village with 10 people.
Never. It's bad business. But the government has to be there. The post office has to deliver mail to a remote farmhouse in the mountains, even if the stamp costs 50 cents and the gas to get there costs $50.
That's the uniformity principle.
Exactly. The government must treat all citizens equally. A private business can choose its customers. It can say, we are a luxury brand. We don't serve low-income people. The government cannot say, we only put out fires for rich people.
Well, historically, that hasn't always been true in practice, but in theory, that is the mandate.
In theory, yes. The state is the provider of last resort. It has to take on the tasks that are too big, too expensive, or too unprofitable for the private sector to touch.
However, we are seeing a shift. You mentioned it earlier. The sources talk a lot about new public management, or NPM. This sounds like the government trying to wear a business suit.
It is. Over the last 30 or 40 years, there has been a massive push to adopt business practices, performance metrics, efficiency targets, treating the citizen as a customer.
We'll definitely get into the pros and cons of that later, but it's interesting that while the fundamental nature remains different, the methods are starting to converge.
Correct. The lines are blurring.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting, at least for me. We are going to step into the time machine. To understand where we are now with this citizen as customer idea, we have to look at how we got here. This field didn't just appear out of nowhere. It went through an identity crisis. Actually, several identity crises.
It did. The evolution of public administration is fascinating because it mirrors the changes in how we view society and human nature. The source material breaks this down into 6 distinct phases.
Let's walk through them. Phase 1. The dates are 1887 to 1926. This starts with the man himself, Woodrow Wilson.
Woodrow Wilson, before he was the president of the United States, before World War I, he was a professor of political science. And in 1887, he wrote an essay called The Study of Administration.
And this is considered the birth certificate of the field.
It really is.
So what was the world like in 1887? Why does he feel the need to write this?
The U.S. government was a mess. It was the era of the spoils system. If a politician won an election, he would fire everyone in the government and hire his friends, his cousins, and his campaign donors.
So competence wasn't really a prerequisite.
Not at all. Incompetence and corruption were features, not bugs. Wilson looked at this and said, this is insane. He proposed a radical idea for the time, the politics-administration dichotomy.
A divorce.
A total divorce. He wanted to separate the dirty, noisy fighting of politics from the clean, business-like execution of administration. He famously said, administrative questions are not political questions.
So his vision was, the politicians fight in Congress to decide what to do.
Yeah.
Once the law is passed, they hand it over to a neutral, professional administrator who figures out how to do it efficiently without any political interference.
Right. He wanted a professional class of experts who were removed from the hurry and strife of politics. This set the tone for the entire field for the next 50 years.
Which leads us to phase two, the golden age of principles, 1927, 1937. Why golden age?
Because scholars thought they had solved it. This is the era of Luther Gulick and Limmel Erwick. They believed that management was a hard science, just like engineering or physics.
This is where POSDCOR reigns supreme.
Absolutely. They believed there were universal principles: unity of command, meaning you should only have one boss; span of control, meaning a manager can only effectively supervise a limited number of subordinates. They thought if you followed these structural rules, you would achieve maximum efficiency.
This was the era of the economic man, right?
Yeah.
The idea that workers are just coin-operated machines. Pay them more, they work harder.
Exactly. It was a very mechanical view of the world. Structure was everything. They didn't really care about the humans inside the structure. They just wanted the blueprint to be perfect.
But then, the machines woke up. Phase 3, the era of challenge, 1938-1947.
The rebellion. This is my favorite phase. This is when the psychologists and sociologists entered the room and absolutely ruined everything for the engineers.
And we have to talk about the Hawthorne experiments. This is such a classic story in management theory.
It is, and it was almost an accident. So Elton Mayo and his team went into a factory, the Hawthorne Works, to study productivity. They were phase 2 thinkers. They thought, if we improve the physical conditions, workers will work harder.
Simple equation, brighter lights should equal harder workers.
So they went into a room with a group of workers and turned the lights up. And just as they predicted, productivity went up. They were thrilled. They thought, we've proven it.
Case closed.
But then, just to be thorough, to have a control group for scientific rigor, they decided to see what happened if they turned the lights down.
Logic says productivity should crash.
But it didn't. It went up again.
Wait, what? They made it darker and people worked harder?
Yes. The researchers were completely baffled. They tried changing all sorts of things, break times, pair schemes, and no matter what they did, productivity kept creeping up.
So what's going on?
They finally realized that the physical conditions, the lights, the break times, none of that mattered as much as one thing.
What was it?
The workers were being watched. Someone was paying attention to them for the first time. They were being asked questions. They felt valued. They had formed a social group. They weren't just individuals. They were a team.
So treating people like humans makes them work better than treating them like cogs in a machine. Groundbreaking.
It was the birth of human relations theory. It completely destroyed the idea that you can just blueprint a workplace and ignore the people. You have to nurture the social and psychological environment.
And while Mayo's proving people have feelings, another guy, Herbert Simon, was tearing apart the textbook.
Herbert Simon was brutal. He looked at those universal principles from phase 2, like span of control and unity of command, and he called them proverbs.
Proverbs, you mean like a stitch in time saves none?
Yes, exactly like that. He said for every proverb there's a contradictory one. Look before you leap, but also he who hesitates is lost.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Simon pointed out that administrative principles were the same. Span of control says keep your team small for close supervision. But minimize hierarchy says keep the chain of command short to improve communication, which means managers need more direct reports. You can't do both at the same time.
So the science of administration was actually just a bunch of contradictory sayings. You could justify any decision by picking the right proverb.
Correct. Simon argued that the old principles were unscientific and useless, and then Robert Dahl piled on, arguing that you can't have a true science of administration because human behavior is unpredictable and values vary across cultures. What works in America won't necessarily work in India.
So phase 3 left the field in shambles. The dichotomy was dead because it was obvious that administrators make political choices all the time, and the principles were dead because they are unscientific proverbs. That brings us to phase 3, crisis of identity, 1948 and 1970.
The field didn't know what it was anymore. Was it political science? Was it management? Was it sociology? But out of this chaos came something beautiful and really important, the new public administration, NPA.
This was the late 60s. The world was on fire, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, student protests everywhere.
Context is everything. A group of young scholars met at the Minnebrook Conference in 1968. They looked at the old guard who were still obsessed with structure and efficiency, and they said, who cares about efficiency if the system is racist? Who cares about budgeting if the poor are starving?
They introduced a new core value, social equity.
This was a massive pivot, a revolution. They argued that efficiency isn't enough. Administration has to be about fairness. It has to be about justice. Administrators shouldn't be neutral. They should be advocates for the poor and marginalized.
So we went from do it cheaply to do the right thing.
Exactly. Then we moved to Phase V, 1971-1990, the public policy perspective. This phase acknowledged that administrators are deeply involved in making policy, not just executing it. The focus shifted to policy analysis and design.
And finally, that brings us to Phase 6, 1991 present, where we are now. Managerialism and governance.
This brings us full circle back to the government as business idea, the new public management, or NPM.
The famous book here is Reinventing Government by Osborne and Gabler. What's the catchphrase?
Steering rather than rowing.
Meaning?
The government shouldn't try to do everything itself. It shouldn't have its hands on all the oars doing the rowing.
Okay.
It should set the direction and policy, that's the steering, but it should hire private companies, nonprofits, or NGOs to do the actual work.
So privatize the garbage collection, outsource the IT department, partner with private firms to build roads.
Exactly. And that evolved into the idea of governance. Governance means it's a network. It's not just the state anymore. It's the state plus civil society plus the private sector all working together to solve problems.
It sounds efficient on paper, but it also sounds incredibly complicated.
It is. It blurs the lines of accountability, which is a big debate. But that is the modern reality.
So we've tracked the evolution from keep politics out to the administrator is a political actor to treat citizens like customers. Which brings us to Section 4, the why. Why does any of this matter in our daily lives?
Because we live in an administrative state.
What does that mean exactly?
It means that from the moment you are born and get a birth certificate to the moment you die and get a death certificate, and every single day in between, your life is shaped and managed by public administration.
The source material lists specific functions. The obvious one is service provider.
Right. Education, healthcare, transportation, sanitation, the things we see every day.
But think about the invisible ones. Diplomacy. The source mentions India's relations with Russia or the USA. That isn't just politicians shaking hands for the cameras.
No, that's the tip of the iceberg. It's administrators drafting treaties, managing trade protocols, handling visas, and gathering intelligence. It's a massive ongoing administrative effort.
And security. Internal and external.
The most fundamental job of the state is to protect the people. The police maintaining order internally, and the army protecting the borders externally. That is pure administration.
But there's a poetic point in the source I really loved. It calls public administration the savior of civilization and culture. That sounds a little dramatic for a field associated with filing cabinets.
It is dramatic, but think about it. The source mentions the Andaman and Nicobar Islands as an example.
The tribal cultures there, the uncontacted peoples.
Yes, these are vulnerable, unique indigenous cultures that have existed for thousands of years. Who protects them from being wiped out by modern tourism or industry? Who enforces the do not enter zones?
The administration.
The government.
Yeah, exactly. Without the administrative machinery enforcing those laws, market forces would bulldoze those cultures in a week.
Yeah.
The administration acts as a shield for the vulnerable parts of our civilization.
It also mentions social change. It's not just about preserving things. No, absolutely not. Administration isn't just about maintaining the status quo. Sometimes the status quo is bad. The source mentions things like child marriage or untouchability in India. These were deeply ingrained customs.
Right. For a long time, society wanted to keep them.
It took the administration, the government enforcing the Constitution, and new laws to break those customs. The district magistrate showing up to stop a child marriage is an act of administration driving social change.
So public admin forces society to evolve, even when society itself is resisting.
Exactly. It enforces the constitutional values of equality and justice, dragging society forward if necessary.
All right, listeners, we have poured a massive amount of theory into your brains. We've covered Wilson, Gulick, POS-DCO, Meadowbrook, and the scissors analogy. Now it's time to see if it's stuck.
It's time for the rapid-fire exam.
Here is how this is going to work. I'm going to ask a question. These are based on actual multiple-choice questions found in the course material. I want you, the listener, to shout out the answer at home or just take it real hard. Then our expert here will give us the correct answer and a quick why. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's see how they do.
Question number 1. Let's go back to the very beginning. Woodrow Wilson's 1887 essay is considered foundational. What was the main concept he advocated for? Was it A, scientific management, B, the separation of politics and administration, C. Human relations theory. D. POSCORB. Take a second.
The answer is B, the separation of politics and administration. Remember, Wilson is the father of the dichotomy. He wanted to build a wall, a divorce, between the dirty politics and the clean, business-like administration.
Perfect. If you guess POSDCOB, you're jumping at about 50 years. Question number 2, speaking of which, who coined the famous acronym POSDCORB? A. Henri Fayol. B. Max Weber. C. Luther Gulick. D. Frederick Taylor.
And that is C, Luther Gulick. He coined it in 1937 in his Notes on the Theory of Organization to summarize the work of the chief executive.
Bonus points, if you can remember what the P stands for.
Planning.
Nice. Question number 3. We talked about 2 views of the scope of administration. Which view says that administration encompasses all activities, managerial, clerical, and technical? A, the managerial view. B, the integral view. C, the private view. D, the modern view.
The answer is B, the integral view. Think of the word integral. It integrates everyone. It's the sum total of all activities. This is the view associated with L.D. White.
Excellent. Question number 4. The Hawthorne experiments were a complete game changer. What theory did they lead to? A, scientific management. B, bureaucratic theory. C, human relations theory. D, public choice theory.
The answer is C, human relations theory. Remember, the lighting didn't matter. The relationships and the attention mattered. It proved that workers are social, emotional humans, not just machines.
Okay, question number 5. This one is a, quote, ID. Who said, government is different because it's political? A, Woodrow Wilson. B, Paul Appleby. C, Herbert Simon. D, L.D. White. This is a tough one.
It is a bit tougher, but the answer is B, Paul Appleby. He was one of the key figures who argued against Wilson's dichotomy in the later phases, emphasizing that you cannot strip the politics out of government work.
Question number 6. We mentioned a pivotal conference in 1968 that changed everything. The Middlebrook Conference and the New Public Administration MPA movement emphasized which new value above all others? A, efficiency. B, economy. C, social equity. D, profit.
The answer is C, social equity. The NPA rebels looked at the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement and said, efficiency isn't enough. We need fairness and justice.
Last one, question number 7. The modern trend, which started around 1991, New Public Management, NPM, was influenced mostly by what? A, Marxist ideology.
Right.
B, neoclassical economics and private sector management. C, military strategy. D, religious texts.
The answer is clearly B. Neoclassical economics and private sector management. Think citizen as customer. It's all about bringing business logic, market principles, and efficiency into government.
Phew. How do you do? If you got 7 out of 7, you are absolutely ready for your exam. If you got 5 or 6, you're in great shape.
And for those of you writing subjective essay answers, remember the formula from our source, Manish-Verma. Don't just list facts. Structure your answer logically.
The Manish-Verma formula. I like it. Break it down for us.
Start with an introduction, maybe about the evolution of man and society. Then define the meaning and etymology of the term. Discuss the nature. Is it an art or a science? Then the scope. List the importance and the functions, and always end with a critique or a conclusion.
Don't just list the points. Elaborate on them to show you really understand.
Exactly. It works. It shows the examiner you understand the whole picture, not just a single definition.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've gone from nomadic tribes needing protection to a massive global administrative state that manages our lives from birth to death.
And we've seen the theory of how to run it go from trying to be a perfect machine to realizing it's run by imperfect humans, and now to trying to run it like a business.
It's a field that is constantly evolving because society is constantly evolving.
It has to.
Here's a final thought for you to chew on as we close out. We talked about the shift to governance, where the government partners with private companies, the whole steering, not rowing idea.
Right. Outsourcing, public-private partnerships, all of that.
If the government outsources more and more of the rowing to private companies, does the public in public administration still mean the same thing it did in Woodrow Wilson's time? Or are we moving toward a world where the line between citizen and customer is gone forever?
That is the billion-dollar question for the 21st century. Because if you are treated as a customer, you only get what you pay for. If you are a citizen, you have inalienable rights, regardless of your ability to pay. Losing that distinction could be very, very dangerous. Something to think about. That's it for today's deep dive into the foundations of public administration. Good luck with your exams and keep learning. Class dismissed.